To prove that white crows exist, it only takes one white crow. To prove that reincarnation exists, we only need one real case. Well, here is one white crow. Now let's look at reincarnation. Back in 1967, Dr. Ian Stevenson founded a division of perceptual studies to look into reincarnation.
The assumption is that when your brain dies, your mind perishes also. That is so deeply believed that scientists fail to understand that it is, in the end, an assumption only. And there's no reason why aspects of the mind shouldn't survive the death of the brain.
Yes, it is an assumption. Reincarnation has been known by many other names, most specifically transmigration of the souls. And it is also an assumption. So we need to look at the details and see if we can find one example of reincarnation.
Stevenson found that parents in different countries have tendencies to respond differently to the reports from the children.
You see, over half of the population of the world, over 4 billion people, believe in transmigration of the soul after death. They believe in a continued existence. And almost universally, we believe in some type of life after death. It's human belief.
We do hear quite often from the parents of Western children that they wish they'd known about this research when their little boy was 3 years old, because he was saying, I used to be a pilot and I was shot down, and we told him to stop telling fibs.
In our Western culture, we call them fibs, lies. But actually, is it just a different perspective? We're going to be showing you excerpts from a Netflix movie, Surviving Death, and its understanding and approaches to reincarnation.
Some people said that reincarnation isn't true. But the very first time Atlas spoke about a past life, I knew it was actually something real.
Many children remember their past lives. They remember these things, and they confuse some of them with their reality. This happens all over the world, and especially in Asian cultures, or cultures where they really believe in past lives a lot more.
When Atlas
was 1.5,
don't talk into it.
He started
having night terrors, screaming in the night.
His eyes
As many
would
children
open,
do. His eyes would be open, he would be screaming as if he was in pain. You see, this is what happens, and there's a memory that happens, a jolt of the past. The night terrors are often a display of a turmoil unsolved from the past.
I confided in his pediatrician, what do we do? No one really had an answer for why he was doing that.
Reincarnation, actually transmigration of the soul, a metatempopsychosis, when a person or animal believes he's been reborn.
And then one day when he was 5 years old, we were just coming home and he was staring out the window. It was silent in the car.
Staring out the window, driving along, as the images cast into the mind. And what ideas flow?
He just said out of nowhere, I miss when my mom took me to the playground. And I said, oh, you mean me when I took you to the playground? And he said, no, my other mom with the really pretty hair.
In quantum physics, we talk about a quantum consciousness, a pattern of electrical impulses that goes beyond just electricity and into a time and space quantum event. And this transmigration of the souls, over 4 billion people in the world believe it. And it's wrong for us to insult their belief. We should be tolerant.
You have another family, what were their names? And he said, well, my mom, her name's Washington, but my name was Jalen Robinson.
A young boy, 1.5, who hasn't developed his own personality, and now the old personality is prevalent.
And then he said, when I was this child, someone killed me. I didn't know what to think at all. So.
Under quantum theory and Buddhist psychology, these things not just are possible, but probable.
I was really trying to think about, where did he come up with this name? Is this someone's name from school? What is he talking about? And so I Googled them. I looked him up just to see, is this real?
The computer offers us so much answers and data right at our fingerprints, but there's no way that a 1.5-year-old could have used a computer to find this.
And then when I found the story in the obituary, I was really shocked to find the exact names. It really surprised me. Jalen died in 2005, and Atlas was born in 2014.
Somehow, without prediction, a transmigration of the souls seems to have happened. Let's look more into the details.
I mean, one of the first few things was Jim Tucker, the University of Virginia. And I ended up writing to him everything that Alice had said.
There are people that actually believe this, the scientists who have taken on the prospect of trying to understand this in more scientific fashion, trying to challenge it, prove it, validate, verify, see if these stories really are true and not fraud.
I've been studying reincarnation for 20 years. Children will typically start talking about the past life at age 2 or 3. We focus on children because they are the ones who are most likely to have these memories.
And these scientists have gone through thousands of cases, and 50% of these cases have been found to be true. Many books have been written along the ideas of validating, verifying the evidence of reincarnation, transmigration of the souls.
And we can be pretty confident that a 2 or 3-year-old has not been exposed to some obscure figure from history. So here we've got pictures of 2 playgrounds, and this is the one near where the boy lived, and then this is a control one.
Are people writing these books for profit? Are they writing it for expansive intellect? Are they writing it as an expression of truth to get others' attention?
Founded in 1967 by Ian Stevenson, he had an interest in parapsychology, and in particular got intrigued by reports of young children saying that they had a memory of a past life.
Dr. Ian Stevenson really pursued an in-depth scientific evidence-searching ability to try to really understand much more about reincarnation.
We do hear quite often from the parents of Western children that they wish they'd known about this research when their little boy was 3 years old, because he was saying, I used to be a pilot and I was shot down, and we told him to stop telling fibs.
For more than half of the world, this idea of a transmigration of the souls is something that isn't just a peculiarity, it's something that's an everyday thing that they live with and believe. It's the center and core of much of their belief.
Some cases are definitely suppressed in the West, but they are much more readily found in South Asia.
There's an awful lot of evidence. There's an awful lot to look at. And if we have the idea of looking for a single white crow, I think we can say that there really is evidence for reincarnation.
A lot of these children would have birthmarks or even birth defects that match wounds on the body of the previous person. Stevenson started to go investigate.
As they looked through the science of this American research, they found that the average age of death of the previous person was 28. So, an awful lot of violence, a lot of aggression that would make this life event, this past life, come out to try to seek some type of understanding. And as they start to look at this, they start to see there was a pattern. There was indeed something to look forward and look and see.
Oh, I had no idea anybody was involved with the cancer.
Alex Stoney is recognized by his clan as being Albert Tate, who was head chief at the time of his death.
To the Eskimo tribes, transmigration of the souls is something that's an everyday thing, something that they expect and treasure.
Before he was born, Alex's grandmother had a dream seeing Albert Tate coming to her and saying, "I'm coming back, I'm coming back." Then when the baby was born, they look at the baby and see striking similarities.
In search of the Dalai Lama, whenever there's Dalai Lama dies, they search for that identity. And this search, this idea of a transmigration, of coming back, is something that many cultures embrace. They're not afraid of it. But it is still rare.
As a newborn baby, I would pull my hands out in front of me and just marvel at my hands and my fingers specifically. Albert Tate lost his fingers in working accidents. I imagine having them back could be a pretty big deal.
Energy, emotion, it happens so many times in the young children. As they feel these things, feel this energy, feel the newness, and compare it to the oldness. And it's something that we need to tolerate as we look at the cultures that embrace this.
My grandma, my mom saw that as Albert Tate coming back. When I was a toddler, I would meet people in the feast hall, and Albert Tate knew everybody's names and where they sat in the feast hall. And so I would lead those people to their names, to their seats. That's pretty remarkable for a toddler to do.
It is very wrong for us to make fun or think it's humorous in any way. We really need to tolerate, at best, and be able to recognize that this belief of transmigration of souls is held by more than 4 billion people on planet Earth today.
And they were just violent, violent nightmares. The stories began. The first story that Ryan ever told, he said, "Mom, I think I need to tell you something. I think I used to be somebody else."
Here's the case of a young boy who had a very vivid memory of Hollywood and a life living in Hollywood. And it had to be coaxed out of him that they started to see more and more validation and verification.
Gathered around, and Ryan pointed to one of them and said,
"Mama, that's George. We did a picture together,
and then he pointed to another one off to the side and said,
and that's me."
when his parents would ask him what his name was, Ryan didn't know.
You don't really have a body, you have a soul. The body is something that's transitory. Sometimes you change models.
And there was very little information about the movie Night After Night on the internet. So it was a real challenge to find out who this unnamed background extra was. Eventually, an archivist went to the library.
Hard to tell how this choice is made. If you watch our video about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you might understand a little bit more about the process of reincarnation, transmigration of the soul.
Of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and found a picture that identified the actor as Marty Martin.
It probably wasn't a month later, Dr. Tucker sitting in my dining room table.
Scientific rigor and trying to anticipate and find out if there really is fraud happening. And they really dig into these stories to try to find out the little subtleties, to see if there can be pictures, ideas, validated.
Dr. Tucker told Ryan, he said, "I'm going to lay out a series of photos. And I want you to choose one if it looks familiar.
This one?
Yeah.
It. Familiar.
Ryan said, that's it. And he picked Marty Martin.
So here he had a memory of working in Hollywood. Very interesting, and yet it was very hard to find this person. No way that this small child could have been able to find this on his own.
And then Dr. Tucker laid out 4 women, and Ryan immediately went without even hesitating. And I seen Dr. Tucker just breaking this huge smile. And I said, Dr. Tucker, who is she? And he said that was his last wife.
So what somebody might think that the parents did it, but in a deeper retrospect, we start to see this is not just happening here and there. We start to see proof of reincarnation.
Ryan had talked a lot about this guy he called Senator 5, who he said was from New York.
That's certified.
We were able to verify that while there wasn't a Senator 5 from New York, there was a Senator Ives from New York then, and that Marty Martin did in fact know him.
They start to show many, many things to this child. He picks all the pictures, solves all the problems. There's like 100% recognition and deep validation and verification.
As he was getting older, he was better able to articulate words, so things became much more understandable.
Many scientists have written many articles about the structure and the criteria for validating this reincarnation research. And they've been able to show that there is evidence. What we think about the material world and material ideas is transitory and varies.
Just out of curiosity, I said, well, who shot your plane down? He said, the Japanese. I said, how did you know it was the Japanese? He said, the big red sun. So I paused and still get goosebumps.
He saw the Japanese flag, the sun, and it gave that memory, because with the Japanese that shot his plane down.
I said, well, where did your plane come from? He said, a boat. So I said, did your boat have a name? And he said, Natoma. I said, that sounds Japanese to me. And he looked at me like I had no brain. He said, no, it's an American. And he was upset.
With great effort, they found the picture of the Natoma. And the whole story started to come together so deeply, so validated, so verified. Almost impossible to challenge. You have to be pretty skeptical and pretty bitter to challenge these ideas.
James Leininger was a little boy in Louisiana who began saying that his plane had crashed, that he had been shot down by the Japanese. He gave some very specific details. In fact, this was when he was 2. His parents were able to ask him questions about these horrific nightmares he had about a plane crash. And he was able to say that he had been shot down by the Japanese and that his plane had flown from the Natoma, is what he named the boat that his plane had taken off of. In addition, the boy later saw a picture of Iwo Jima and said that was where he was shot down. Also, it began saying that he was the 3rd James. When his dad searched online, he eventually found that there was the USS Natoma Bay. The Natoma Bay was involved in the Iwo Jima operation. There was one pilot from the Natoma that was killed in Iwo Jima, and his name was James Houston, Jr. So James Leininger would be the 3rd James after the Junior. Another detail that James gave was that he had a friend named Jack Larson, and it turned out that there was another pilot on the Natoma named Jack Larson. The child was talking about a past life from more than 50 years before, which is unusual in our cases. So there was seemingly no way that he could have known the details that he came up with.
Goodbye, James and Houston.
His father was an evangelical Christian who was totally resistant to reincarnation. But his son gave out so much information about World War II. They said, you know, he could not have learned this watching Sesame Street.
I salute you.
Eventually, he went to a Natoma Bay reunion, and that's where he learned that there was one and only one pilot from the ship who was killed during the Iwo Jima operation.
We talk about a white crow, proving that white crows exist. I think that these cases, and especially this case, really does prove that reincarnation exists.
I called Andrea and I said, well, there was only one man killed during the Battle of Iwo Jima from this ship and from this particular squadron.
I think these stories will give you a little tingle, especially this story of the young boy. It starts to really give you more than just a tingle. It gives you an awareness, a belief, to start to understand.
There was only one man killed during the Battle of Iwo Jima from this ship and from this particular squadron, and his name was James M. Houston Jr.
As the boy started to grow older, he started to fade some of the memory as the fighter pilot past life just fades into his current life, and they mold and blend.
And his name was James M. Houston Jr.
I said, that would make James the third James.
Stop.
You might want to watch a show on Netflix, Surviving Death. It'll give you a real tingle. They talk about mediums and mystics and all different other things about death. But you start to get an idea that there is a quality of the mind that can survive death. We start to see that there really is a white crow. That proves that white crows exist. We don't need to find that they're all white crows. And that reincarnation does exist. I welcome you to look deeper.